Well, Scottish voters supposedly promised to stick with the UK, but there's shocking video compilation shot right off UK television, right off Scottish and English and Irish television. It's a compilation showing live feeds of huge stacks of voter cards that say yes, leave, but they're in the stacks that say no, stay. Now, Stalin said the great part about running the government was he got to count the votes, so he didn't care how you voted, just who counted them. There is a lot of evidence of election fraud. There's not always election fraud. And in a lot of polls, it was running obviously neck and neck. But this does look pretty bad. And there were pros and cons from researching it to stay in the UK or get out of it. But I'm for whatever the Scots wanted to vote to do. But they've been so domesticated under socialism and under Labour Party for 50, 60 years that a lot of them are scared to get out of the welfare state they were in for a new welfare state they were being promised. If it was managed right, and if foreign interest didn't come in and loot Scotland like they've done Greece and Italy and so many other countries, then I would be for Scottish independence. But you know what? It's not really my business, is it? It's the Scots' business. And if there is fraud going on here, we need to expose it. And my gut tells me that there probably is fraud, maybe on both sides. That's what usually happens in elections. It's like a war, who can steal on both sides, and that's always the argument. Well, they're going to cheat, so we better cheat. But there's just really massive evidence mounting that there was fraud. And Paul Watson will join us. We'll roll some of that video for TV viewers to see. Radio listeners can go to Infowars.com. Russian election observers are saying Westminster rigged Scottish independence vote. Well, Russia would say that because they want to work developing gas with Scotland. They're heavily developing gas right off the shore there. So are the British. Also, banksters aligned behind globalist climate agenda. Very important article by Kurt Nemo. Again, yes, supporters claim videos show Scottish referendum was rigged. These are just the headlines, top to bottom. The Dow and S&P 500 soar to irrational heights. Meanwhile, the ultra-wealthy run by gold bars. Very important article by Michael Schneider. This one really makes me mad because I see these articles every day now. Every day. No exaggeration. Sometimes multiple times. Nosy neighbors, 6 cops, child services on innocent mom. Don't let your kids play outside. She says she doesn't like hearing them yell, so she calls CPS. This is the new thing. I mean, I'll go to public pools and people don't want kids splashing or yelling. Or if water hits them, they'll actually say something. I'm like, you're in a pool. Or go buy your own house and get a pool and then have a fence around it. It makes me so angry. It's not illegal to go outside. It's not illegal to have your kids play in the backyard or at the park across the street. They're now sending CPS when 11-year-olds are playing 300 feet. I mean, my dad was sent to work at different apprentice jobs at oil refineries and stuff when he was 10. They'd send him for 2 weeks down to Houston or send him for a few weeks over here to literally pick cotton, send him a few weeks. I mean, he was sent all over. That's what you did in the old days. You sent your sons, especially, all over to learn different angles, different things. So many of my ancestors, my dad's great uncle, ran away when he was 11 and went on a steamship around the world and came back 20 years later and ended up becoming, wealthy and very successful and ran alcohol with Al Capone, a bunch of other stuff. And Steiner's great-granddaddy. That's just funny, those connections. But, I mean, his great-grandfather, Buck, who died at 100 and something, was working in the stockyards when he was 7 in Fort Worth before he moved down here. We'll be right back. In a few moments, we're going to be talking to Paul Joseph Watson from London, England. He's been following the vote in Scotland that came in at about midnight Central Time last night. Scottish voters choose to stick with the United Kingdom. But now we have the headline at prisonplanet.com and Infowars.com with an extremely powerful video that we're going to be rolling in the background of different clips from the news showing huge tables of the ballots where people reportedly were saying that they wanted independence, saying yes, but then it's in the no column. Says it's in the no stack, and then they zoom in on the ballots, stack after stack, and it's marked yes, yes, yes. And then it cuts from Sky News to other videos that individuals shot showing what appears to be the people running it, filling out piles of no votes and putting them in the yes stacks. And this was on national television, just in the background as the commentators are talking, this is going on. Yes supporters claim video shows Scottish referendum was rigged despite a 10% margin of victory with no campaign in the Scottish referendum. Some supporters of the yes camp for independence are pointing to videos which they claim show evidence of vote rigging. We're going to be breaking this down. Now joining us from London, England, Paul Joseph Watson, I guess of Scottish descent himself. And I know he's from the north of England, formerly from Sheffield. I know his view was mixed on this because if you bring in an outside group and it'll just be new government management and they may be looted, but obviously the UK is a corrupt system as well, but the UK itself's already under the EU, and from what I've seen from Lord Monckton, which is a pretty powerful argument, the EU, it will be in more control of Scotland now because they're not getting out of the EU deal. So it's almost a vacuum, like a new conqueror. You pull out one group and just insert another. I want to get Paul's view on this and the big news that Scots are saying it was rigged. Paul Joseph Watson, your story's on Infowars.com. First off, what do you make of fraud? What do you think of the election?
Well, there are numerous claims coming out, Alex, in light of this voting which took place yesterday. We know before the election even took place that they were sending out polling cards to children as young as 3 years old. So there were all these people being registered to vote who weren't legally allowed to vote. Then yesterday you had police in Glasgow investigating at least 10 different cases of people who came in to vote and were told that they had already voted. They'd been crossed off the list. So obviously people were coming in to vote twice. So that's confirmed that there was vote fraud that way. Then you've got these videos, as you mentioned, which, again, you know, for the moment, they're just allegations. We don't know exactly what they show. And this is sporadic as far as we can tell. But, you know, one example, the lady's counting out the votes. She takes cards from the yes pile, puts them in the no pile. Another example, there's a bunch of yes cards, referendum cards that are stacked on top of the no table, so they may have been counted as no votes.
And by the way, all the body language of these people is very sneaky looking. That's what my kids act like when they're doing something wrong.
And then there's another guy who's apparently filling in referendum cards. They could be something else, but they look like the referendum cards at a polling station, so why is he filling them in? So there are numerous questions swirling around this, nothing concrete.
I want to break this down when we come back in detail from your article at Infowars.com. It's been tweeted out at Real Alex Jones and on Watson's Twitter as well. We'll be right back. Stay with us. There's a lot of financial news coming up in the next segment after Paul leaves us. Alibaba's IPO to end U.S. dominance in technology sector, experts are saying. Meanwhile, we've got a more detailed story up on Infowars.com dealing with what exactly is happening with the ultra-rich buying gold bars as the stock market goes to all-time highs. But the Telegraph is also reporting on it. Super rich to buy Italian job-style gold bars. Economic uncertainties trigger rush to buy 12.5 kilo gold bars worth as much as 300,000 pounds each, or $500,000 or so. Absolutely. Universities, governments, they're all private individuals are just buying gold at record levels. But they artificially use the paper market to hammer it. This has come out even in the New York Times, and just to keep it at the price. Well, that's a buying opportunity because when all this paper goes down, but I don't even plug gold because the average people won't buy it unless it's racing up. I buy gold when it's going down. So unfortunately, it's been the same for a while. I haven't bought any. But as soon as it dips, I get in there and buy some. And I've built a small amount for my family, a little nest egg, as you could say, a lot of silver as well. Most of my silver I bought at $5, $6, $7. Most of my gold I bought at $300, $350, $400. Never sold any of it. Didn't sell it when it went to 2,000. Didn't sell it when it went down to 1,100. Didn't sell it when it went back up to 13. I just you know. And we're going to cover that. Paul Watson, continuing with you on Scotland. You would think after the British trying to take it over for 500 years and finally getting it the last few hundred and exploiting it to a great extent, the British Empire, not the British people so much, the most exploited under the empire in many respects, most happily exploited, I could also add from my historical research. I really don't buy it that they didn't vote for independence because the polls, most polls are running, 5% for. What do you think really happened here?
I think they were set to get the yes vote as of a couple of weeks ago. That was the crucial point where those polls said that the yes campaign was ahead for the first time, because at that point, the elite in Westminster went into a complete tailspin. They were in an absolute panic. The three major parties aligned. They all went up to Scotland, and the propaganda was intense. They corralled the media, the BBC, most of the tabloids around this no campaign. And then you saw the polls again sway backwards. So whether there was voting fraud or not, certainly in sporadic cases, it seems that way. Also, these other election observers are saying that the polling slips in places like Edinburgh were just lying around. There was no security whatsoever. They called it last century style voting. So there were obviously some sporadic cases of it, but I think it was that propaganda in the week beforehand where the establishment rallied everything around this no campaign that kind of swung it back for them. But in terms of the long-term general picture, I mean, it's as the New York Times says, it's the crisis of the global elites. From my perspective, they were just voting for a new slave master because Alex Salmond, the leader of the Yes campaign, the SNP party, is basically an outright socialist. He used to be a Maoist. They basically want more welfare. They would have just delivered Scotland even further into the hands of the EU. So it wouldn't really have been a positive change. It probably would have collapsed. But
well, exactly. That's why at a primitive level, knowing what happened to the Scots, I want them to get free of the UK. But the UK, for all intents and purposes, has 83% of its laws made by the EU. That's even more evil. And it's just almost didn't even matter.
Right, but you know, if you look to other places in Europe, like Murdoch said yesterday, it's an anti-establishment groundswell where there are more alternative options like UKIP, which are not going to lead the country astray to a certain extent. I mean, there are some disturbing noises coming out of UKIP recently and Farage saying we need to give up freedom for security, which is of concern. But you know, I voted for UKIP and they seem to be really rabble-rousing in terms of upsetting the establishment. You've got Le Pen in France. There was a recent poll that said if there was a presidential election in France now, I believe the next one is in 2017, that Le Pen would defeat Hollande, who obviously is, again, another socialist who has completely wrecked France's economy. So there's this entire groundswell of separatism as well, the Basque region in Spain, Catalonia, Bavaria in Germany, Denmark, Holland, all these other places where there's a groundswell of anti-establishment separatism. Italy as well, which has been completely screwed over by the EU, by the economic collapse. And of course, it's driven by these massive high unemployment rates and this discord with the establishment, with the elite. So in terms of the general trend, even though the Yes campaign lost, I think that the outlook is positive in terms of this separatist move to get power based more locally so people can have a greater impact.
I want to come back and go over your article a little bit more. Top story on Infowars.com, Russian election observers, Westminster rigged Scottish independence vote with Paul Joseph Watson. Then I'm going to shift gears into the economic news, Putin news with their own internet kill switch. I mean, if Obama's got one, I guess Putin needs one. And a lot more coming up. Stay with us.
Introducing the first proprietary oxygen-based intestinal cleanser, OxyPowder. Backed by real FDA-approved phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. People are suffering from all kinds of digestive issues these days. All the toxins from the air, the food, the water, ultimately ends up in the gut or affects the gut. My main focus was to come up with a remedy for this, something that's safe and effective that anyone can take on a regular basis to keep their intestinal lining clean. My recommendation is to clean your intestines at least 2 to 3 times a week to prevent the toxic buildup from going into your bloodstream. Take your health into your own hands and start cleansing your body today with Oxy Powder. Secure your Oxy Powder today at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com.
But this is what we're dealing with. And so I can't just emotionally say, I'm for Scottish independence. I have to go back and say, well, there's other tyranny that's going to come in, and these are socialists that are running this, so it may just be a deal to loot Scotland even faster than the UK would. But it's all tentacles of the same monster. And the tentacles kind of compete with each other when they're shooting out there, grabbing things, but whatever they grab still goes in the same mouth. And so you'll have them fighting with each other over a piece of something. There's a competition to the New World Order's criminal activities. I want to get some final words on this from Paul Watson, then we're going to shift gears into other news. Paul, go back into your article because you got cut off earlier about what the Russians are saying and any other points that are important about this historic no vote on leaving Her Britannic Majesty's kingdom. And we have the image up there that Kurt Nimmo put together of the Queen of England and a famous quote by Cecil Rhodes that's public. Why should we not form a secret society with but one object, the furtherance of the British Empire and the bringing of the whole world under British rule? And that's the guy that set up Oppenheimer, De Beers, and set up the Council on Foreign Relations and publicly wrote multiple books that I've personally read that you can buy that are available at libraries describing the entire world government plan, the 10 kingdoms, the 3 super regions, the eugenics-based program around it. It's incredible information. Infowars.com right now. Going back to Paul Watson, final comments.
Yeah, there are several remarks made by these Russian election observers. One's reported in Newsweek. That was the one who said the ballots were basically lying around, no security whatsoever. Then there's Georgy Fyodorov, who told RIA Novosti, and he's part of one of Russia's top election observer groups. And again, we're not pretending that they're neutral, but it's still interesting to hear what they had to say about the referendum vote. And he said, quote, according to what our observers at the polling offices tell us, there were more yes votes during the vote count. He also said, Scotland found itself under immense pressure. Those on the UK side campaigning for a no vote resorted to every violation imaginable. And his comments are backed up by Igor Morozov, who also pointed to the intense propaganda campaign on behalf of Westminster that preceded the vote in the week before, and definitely said that that had an impact. So, you know, so far there are these sporadic cases of vote fraud that were allegedly caught on video. We've got those in the article as well. So we'll continue to watch it. I mean, we know the police are investigating cases of vote fraud in Glasgow, and there were ballots sent out to 3-year-old children weeks before the vote took place. So there are obviously illegal ballots being submitted as votes. So we'll continue to track it, but definitely a lot of questions being asked at the moment.
Paul, what else are you keeping your eyes on? We've seen this Alibaba IPO come out threatening, quote, U.S. dominance of tech stocks. The whole establishment world has always planned to suck the West dry and then leverage that into investments to dominate Asia, particularly China. But China is also teetering on collapse because of the inequities and the corruption, not inequities that communism didn't deliver. It delivered total tyranny, but the new inequities that they allow a superclass to engage in free market activity while keeping a giant underclass as slaves. Thousands of riots per month in China. But it shows the globalist worldview of like locust eating us to the bone, or piranha, and then moving on to the next phase.
Yeah, but I think there's a definite split that took place. In fact, a couple of months ago, you had one of the top people out of these elite organizations, I forget which one it was, but he basically said that, I think it was the former US ambassador to Russia, who said Russia is no longer part of the New World Order. They have betrayed us. And now you see they're setting up this anti-IMF dollar system, anti-dollar system. They're setting up their own internet with China and Brazil. And basically the BRICS nations are building this multipolar alternative world system, which is a direct threat to the unipolar New World Order that's being built by the US, the EU, and NATO. So I definitely see a split. I mean, you had a top Chinese PLA professor come out earlier this week and say that they're preparing for a world war. They know where this is heading, that they're going to get ready in terms of sea battles and territory battles. So China is preparing for a world war. We know Russia recently revised its military doctrine to treat NATO as an enemy, to authorize a preemptive nuclear strike on NATO countries. So it definitely seems like there's been a split over the past couple of years, of course, centering around Ukraine. So it definitely seems to have changed in that way. And then in terms of the grassroots stuff, of course, you had Brzezinski saying there's a global political awakening. So change and revolt is in the air, but they're trying to steer it towards their own ends. We saw they hijacked the Arab Spring. Obviously, in the case of Scottish independence, that wasn't a purely freedom-orientated movement. It was driven largely by the socialist SNP. So revolt is coming, change is coming. It's just who drives it, who diverts it, who gets control of the reins.
And then we have Newt Gingrich and others saying that the American people are really mad at the government. The establishment better do something. This is as he and others push the same agenda. Look at John Boehner with Obama funding Obamacare yesterday. They didn't repeal anything. They didn't even repeal the most horrible parts of it because the special interests wrote it. And now the elite are realizing, though, that this is going to be a horrible world we're going to live in, that they're destroying the golden goose. The mid-level and even some of the high-level people aren't really bad. They're just greedy mercenaries. And now they're understanding, whoa, this is really an anti-human, exterminist, really wicked, dark program that is coming in. And it's not going to be good for your grandkids. It's not going to be good for you. People 30, 40 years ago said the New World Order will be really bad for your grandkids. Well, 30, 40 years later, people that were 20, 30, 40 years old then have grandkids. And so now it's here. This is the beginning of the season of woe. This is the beginning of the seasons of crises after crises. As the carrying limit of the planet is reached, not because we didn't have a higher carrying limit, but because they artificially cut stuff off, stifled new development and innovation, and are going to try to use the global crisis of the carrying limit being reached to pose as saviors to try to stop the collapse when they are actually orchestrating it and riding this dragon, riding this beast. It is a hellish, dark logic they're using, and we've all got front row seats to it. And folks, we don't want to just have front row seats. We want to get in the arena. And that's where you'll get battle-tested in politics, battle-tested in business, battle-tested in life. That's where you'll learn how everything works. And the whole system is built to arrest your development, keep you in a childlike state. That's why people used to send their kids to apprentice when they were 7 years old. They called it child labor. It had some evils to it. Paul Watson, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to continue breaking this down. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, just on the economic front, I mean, they're obviously preparing this bubble to inflate it even bigger, to pop it and collapse it, and we're going to see more riots. I mean, for months before Ferguson, I was on here, you were on saying that riots were coming. That took place. They're only going to get bigger. And they're making the bubble, they're inflating it to such an extent. You know, I know people in the UK who needed mortgages for £300,000 and the banks were offering them 600,000, just saying, here, take it. So they're inflating that bubble even more now.
Oh, the inflation is hitting everywhere. Things are getting so expensive. And then what happens when the welfare check comes, but it doesn't buy anything anymore? And they're increasing the welfare checks by 3% a year. They'd have to be increasing them by 10, 15% a year to even let people get what they had before. That's why the discontent will increase. People say, hey, make those lazy people work. Well, they took the jobs away. They brainwashed them and incentivized being lazy. They don't know how. Then you've got working poor paying the tickets, paying the fines, paying the fees, paying the doctors, paying the tuition. They don't have the money. They're breaking down. They're having heart attacks. They scream at their wife. The wife calls the cops. Now they're in jail. Just everything is designed to destroy predatorily and drive us over the edge of a cliff. Paul Watson, thank you so much for joining us. And again, Paul Watson, Also does news reports for the InfoWars Nightly News. You can see every weeknight, 7 o'clock Central at prisonplanet.tv. Speaking of prisonplanet.tv, now is the time to become a member. It's been around, I don't know, 12, 13, 14 years now. Been around since 2000, I guess 14 years. And I've been around on air for almost 20. And it's got some of the very first stuff I ever did that's nowhere even on the web but prisonplanet.tv. It's got my book in version, Paul Watson's book, Order Out of Chaos, Elite-sponsored Terror New World Order. It's got the nightly news, special reports on the road. It's just got everything, all the films in HD. 11 people can use your membership. Just give them your username. 11 people can use your membership. It's $5.95. Share it with friends and family. If you are a member and haven't done that, become one today. Alex Jones here to break down some exciting developments in the area of research concerning supplemental iodine. It's nothing less than phenomenal. I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. And I used some of the mainline iodine supplements and they upset my stomach and I had some issues with it. Until I discovered a product being developed by Dr. Group, who I was already interviewing as an expert on my radio show, and I began taking the product before he actually rolled it out. You now know it as Survival Shield True Nascent Iodine that your body can really absorb. Then, about a year ago, he said, listen, if you think this is powerful, I'm going to come out with rare earth, deep earth crystals that are incredibly powerful that no one else has as a source for their iodine from between 7,000 and 12,000 feet, literally drilled out of the ground. You put it on a hot plate and it turns into the pure gas. No one else has 99.99% pure iodine. And the results that I personally have had have been life-changing. I was over 270 pounds. And with the iodine, exercise, and better diet, I have lost now more than 50 pounds total, and I'm continuing to lose the weight. I have more energy, my libido, all this crap came out of my skin. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. This is innovating. This is trailblazing. And the best part is it helps fund Infowars.com, the radio show, the TV show, the whole media operation promoting true libertarian ideas. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off Super Detox special at InfoWarsLife.com.